Today we have a very, very special guest, Galia Benartzi. She is the co-founder of Bancor. And why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself and let us know kind of what you're working on right now with Bancor protocol.
Thank you so much for having me. So like you said, I'm Galia Benartzi. I'm the co-founder of Bancor protocol. At Bancor, we work on automating convertibility between tokens. What we want is for any token to be able to become any other token quickly, easily, fairly, affordably with the click of a button. And the reason that this is so important to us is that we believe that the token economy as a whole can really only thrive when there is free and fair infrastructure to enable the movement of tokens. So just a quick example, if you use a certain token within one decentralized application and a different token in your neighborhood community for commerce, you want to be able to really quickly and really easily trade one token for the other in that moment that you need it.
As you know, pixEOS is an art and gaming cryptocurrency. We're building an economy of creatives. So what do you think about building an artist-centered economy, a cryptocurrency? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's fascinating. I really come from the school of thought that says that there's no limit to the amount of tokens or currencies that we can see out there, just as there's no limit to the amount of pieces of art or communities or projects or startups that we can see out there. It's really, and this doesn't mean that an infinite number of anything can succeed or can sustain itself over time. But what it does mean is that anyone theoretically can try, and anyone can access the tools of creativity and of proposing value into the ecosystem, into the society, and seeing if there's a match between what they're proposing and what other people want. We use money to do this all the time. We align incentives between the government, corporations, consumers, hopefully the environment. And money is the tool that lets us coordinate all of that value suggestion or the creation of value, and then the consumption of value. And prices is kind of how we find the balance between the wants and needs in any given markets. And sometimes that works great, and sometimes it has problems. What we see with the token economy is now the ability for folks like yourself to suggest new kinds of money, new kinds of tokens, to align incentives around new value propositions or new communities of people. Just like in the early days, money had its own kind of shape and size, whether you're talking about shells, or gems or salt, or then silver and gold and precious metals. And now we're talking about Ethereum-based tokens and EOS-based tokens, proof of work tokens, proof of stake tokens. We're talking about new forms of money that essentially enable the same age-old thing, which is aligning incentives and expectations around different value propositions. So I think your project is fascinating in that it's one of the very many creative use cases we expect to see now that the technology threshold is kind of steadily lowering and enabling more and more folks to utilize blockchain technologies, to utilize tokens in order to align incentives around their projects.
Speaking of art, I read an article or an interview with you, and you mentioned that you like some kinds of art. So what kind of art do you gravitate towards?
These days, I'm really consuming a lot of content, if you will, and I don't know if how the syntax around art is changing, but I think that there are a lot of folks who are able to use digital formats, for me specifically video, to create communities around their thoughts, around their ideas, around their ability to hold space for conversations among either like-minded folks or not like-minded folks. And so I'm consuming a lot of content online. I think the influencer market is incredibly interesting. Again, it follows some of these same trends we've been talking about, democratization of access. You used to have to be, a big movie star or the owner of a cable news network or a well-known journalist in order to have an audience around your ideas or your skills or your ability to facilitate high quality conversations or conversations of some kind. And today you can actually be almost anyone with access to a webcam, to an internet connection, and to thoughts and ideas that people gravitate towards. New and upcoming influencers, content creators, content curators, and watching how these tools, be it the internet or now blockchain, are enabling kind of new types of entrepreneurship. And you can think of entrepreneurship, or I do in this case, like a kind of art. So in my personal entrepreneurship, we work in tech and software and consumer products, but there are new kinds of entrepreneurship, such as curating relevant Instagram accounts and being followed by folks who trust your taste and your judgment. And so the millions of accounts and photos out there, and people put in you their followership, their likes, their comments, and other types of engagement. That's a kind of, let's call it job, if you will, or craft or art that didn't exist before we had these tools. And as these tools are becoming more and more, first of all, stable, second of all, known and understood, and then accessible, folks like yourself are finding new art and new entrepreneurship around using them in their vision.
What advice do you have for anyone building communities in the cryptocurrency space, considering you did those pilots? I found that interesting when you did the pilot of the Hearts currency, that you created this whole new economy that didn't exist before. I mean, it does exist in all of us because we all have energy and time. But what kind of advice do you have for people like me who are actually building these communities and like teaching people about, it's in our mind, the idea of money, and we have resources inside that are not being utilized because we think of just money and as not related to what our true resources, which is our creativity, time, and like innovative thinking. I feel like those are three things that are not really tapped into on a mass scale, I should say.
One thing that comes to mind that I often find myself experiencing and then sharing with others is that it's like kind of age-old wisdom in a way, but true community takes time.
Yes.
So we know this from our family, from our friends. The community of people around us didn't just happen overnight, and it's not people that we met on Facebook yesterday. Even though social media and digital media gives us much more reach than we've ever had before, depth still comes over time. And it's really that depth of connection that leads to the kind of trust that enables people not only to engage in regular business and commerce with each other, but certainly to utilize these new tools and new technologies, which do require at first a kind of a leap of faith out of our existing concepts and into some new paradigms. And so that trust between community members does take time to build, and it is something that begins with giving, and the getting comes later. And so unless that's something that you believe in, are passionate about, are willing to put the time into, you'll find that it's an uphill battle, or that the trust links are very thin and are easily broken. And when your product hits a glitch or a bug, when you have a PR problem, when you have a maintenance issue, when you have a conflict between members or between partners of the community. And so I like to remind people that real community as we know it from each of our individual lives takes time to build. Certainly we can accelerate the reach and also the processes using new technology, but the old thing, the connections between people, still follow a kind of ancient biology, if you will, that takes time to build. Using cryptocurrencies to enable the interactions within a community is to really step back almost and whiteboard your community like it's an economy, like it's a full country, in the sense of who's doing what, who's got what to give, who has what needs, who is available at what different times, who prioritizes what in which different ways, who values time more because they have less of it, who values money more because they have less of it. What are all the different kind of stakeholders in the community needing and wanting and able to give and looking to receive, and really start kind of mapping what the incentives are for any one individual stakeholder to participate in this economy. So that's kind of phase one of the exercise, is the internal circular economy that exists within a community, and really the sky's the limit there in terms of what people want and need and have to offer, like you said. And then phase two is recognizing that whatever economy this is that you're trying to activate within a given community, it doesn't exist in isolation. It's not an island in the middle of the ocean that never used dollars before, or never used euros, or doesn't have rent to pay, or doesn't still need gas for their car. It is a community, and potentially it's an economy, and it exists within and in relation to many, many other communities and economies, and certainly the traditional economies that we all operate within, our national economies, and then also our international economies. And so phase two of the exercise is really understanding what's the bridge between the economy that you're creating and designing your token to empower, and the other economies that your community exists in relation to, or also coexists within. So as an example, you mentioned the Hearts currency, and that's a pilot that the Bancor founders ran many years ago. We issued a currency called Hearts for a group of mothers, and the mothers, more accurate to say, the mothers issued the currency called Hearts for their group using our technology. And basically every mother, and eventually also fathers and families generally, would receive hearts for joining, and then could earn more hearts for doing a variety of activities. In phase one, as I called it, of the community kind of mapping exercise, you want to understand who are the stakeholders, what do they need, what do they have to offer, what are their constraints, what are their incentives to participate. And then in phase two, what we wanted to understand is, what's the link between mothers or families spending hearts within this circular economy? Phase two, what you want to understand is, what's the connection between your community and your community currency and the existing economy that your members are operating in. So that can be the cash payment that at first is made to get the tokens to begin with. That can be a network of small businesses around your community that accept your currency in exchange for goods and services and products. You want to basically map not only what are the bridges between community members using your currency, but what are the bridges between your community and other communities and the existing economy.
Awesome. Thank you. And our last question is, what is the most surprising thing that you have learned in the process of starting up Bancor?
One of the most surprising things that I've learned throughout Bancor, and it's very also related to the topic that we work on, this topic around what is money and how can we make it better. But an interesting insight these past couple years has been, it's as hard to build with money as it is to build without money. It's kind of an interesting insight that we had the good fortune to be exposed to, which is that resources, especially in the form of cash, do not make the challenges of creating real value, real sustainable value, and offering it to the world, to your customers, to consumers, to community. There's just as many challenges on one side as there are on the other, and I think it's very kind of par for the course with what we're building and what we're really learning, as you said, some of your insights about money, which is that the challenges that we face are really in our collaboration and our cooperation. And that's, that brings us back to our personal challenges of how do we exist in the world and how do we exist with others in the world. And then to our organizational challenges of how do we build a company, how do we empower people, how do we achieve our objectives, how do we even define them, and how do we exist kind of within the greater economy between these companies, between competing priorities. And so in a book I read recently, a similar point was made about, your problems never end. They just upgrade to better problems, right? So naturally, having resources available is a better problem than not having resources available, but it's still a problem. There's still a lot of problems. So I think that's been an interesting insight, and it really informs our work, where in the end of the day, the thing that we're building, the thing that we're trying to do is not about having more money. It's about having better money. It serves people better fundamentally.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah. And as you know, pixEOS is going to be on Bancor very soon. This is pre-recorded, so maybe by the time we release this, we will be on Bancor. The date is not set. However, we are very excited because we're big fans of Bancor and the protocol itself. It's genius.
Really appreciate your early adopter interest and your support and your explanatory power. I always say that storytelling is one of the true superpowers of this and most industries, and it's great to work with other great explainers.